Connie, tell us who you are.
Wow. Well, you know who I am. We go back quite a ways, but I'm a mother, and I guess you'd say I'm a wife in a committed relationship
For a long time.
for a very long time.
Yeah.
I'm your quintessential country girl as far as I'm concerned, which there are many facets to that.
Yeah.
So it's a really deep subject. Who am I? But
Don't you have another title?
another title?
Mm-hmm.
Well, of course, I'm a grandmother.
There you go.
I'm a grandmother, and can't leave those precious babies
No.
out. So two great little girls,
Yeah.
love them dearly. Can't get enough of them.
Awesome. So yes, I have known you for a very long time, and the one thing that I've always known about you, even when we were teenagers, is that you were a strong woman. Strong-willed, strong woman, knows what she wants and goes after it. So as we became adults, tell me about the profession that you went into.
Well, didn't intend to go into the profession. Started out being a clerical support person, a secretary, if you will, for a pest control company. I had worked for two other pest control companies prior to going to this one, so that industry, as some do, kind of gets in your blood. And so I worked for this pest control company back in the 90s for a couple of years, and then after separation from my husband, I went back to work for them. And after about 2 years in the office, my supervisor, the manager of the office, offered me a route. He did it in a joking manner.
Why is that in a joking manner?
Well, because customers would call and they would ask questions that we were supposed to refer to their technician.
Uh-huh.
So we were supposed to tell them, your pest control technician will call you back and, help you out with that. But I had the knowledge and the information, and it was really hard for me not to share it, even though that wasn't our policy. And I got in trouble for that.
You got in trouble for that?
Well, yeah.
Because it wasn't the policy.
Yeah, we weren't supposed to do it. So
Weren't you customer service?
Yes, but that would be on the level of handling their bills,
Their
not
account
their
or whatever.
service.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
not their service, and not giving them that type of information about their pest issues, because I'm not the one that's there.
Gotcha.
The technician is the one
Okay.
that's there. So I wasn't supposed to be answering
Okay.
those questions. But anyway, so one day in December, my boss said something about putting me on a route, and put my hand on my hip, and I said, well, what, are you trying to get rid of me? And he said, well, you always seem to want to do the technician's job, so I thought maybe I'd let you have a crack at it. And I knew which route was available,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, well, only if I can have that route.
Mm-hmm.
And it covered lots of rural areas
Mm-hmm.
that, were just areas I would love to be in,
Mm-hmm.
with the type of people I would love to work with,
Mm-hmm.
down to earth people.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, well, yeah, let's do that come the first of the year. All of our trucks were straight drives, and I didn't know how to drive a straight drive.
Are you serious?
I did not.
How
I
did you
not.
get out of that?
Well, when I was a kid, my dad he didn't have the patience. We tried for him to
Okay.
teach me. So I never learned.
That is actually true, because mine didn't teach me either. My ex-husband actually taught me how to drive a straight drive.
Yeah, so when it got down to it, I tried the girly thing. I looked at my boss and I'm like, well, can't you just give me one of the automatics? Because we did have some automatics,
Mm-hmm.
but the new person had to take the oldest vehicle.
Uh-huh.
And so we graduated up to the newer vehicles the longer you had worked as a technician. So I had to start out with a little beater of a truck,
Uh-huh.
and the lesser of our fleet. But at any rate, he put his hand on his hip and he said, no, Miss Connie, you will learn how to drive straight drive just like everybody else. And he said, because what if yours is broken down one day? If you have an automatic and it's broken down, and you have to put you in something else, and it's a straight. So on my lunch breaks, before I ever started on the route, I would take a straight drive off of the lot and go out and drive it around in our little office complex.
Oh, wow.
Where the office was located,
Mm-hmm.
grinding gears and
How we learn.
doing the pachuga, and
Yeah.
I was 38 years old.
Yeah.
And so I transitioned the 2nd of January. I went out on a route and started crawling under houses and killing bugs and became a
Interesting.
hired killer.
Interesting. So, what did the men in the office think about that? Because that's predominantly men do that job, right? I don't know that I've seen many women doing that job.
It is predominantly held by men. I have seen other women and met other women that do it, but they're few and far between. And they generally don't do it more than a year. A year is generally the timetable that
What is
they'll
that? Why is that?
have no idea, but that's something that my boss told me. He
Mhm.
said generally they'll do it for a year and then they give it up and go on and do
Is it
something
because
else.
it's too rigorous, or because of crawling under houses, or
I don't know.
Don't really know.
I don't
Okay.
really know because I didn't fall into that category.
no? Of course, yes.
I did it for 8 years.
Okay.
So I left the office after 2 years and went out and had a route for 8.
Mhm.
And that was in all temperatures.
Yeah.
So
In a uniform.
in a uniform.
Yeah.
Hot weather, cold weather, snow, a little bit of ice, it just didn't matter. Pouring down rain, I've had to pull over and wait for it to rain buckets, and then get on down the road. And that's the thing, sometimes the weather throws this huge monkey wrench into what your plans for the day were. If you've had a lot of outside services, you can't get them done. So you have to be able to fill your day and not waste your time, because being paid on production time is money.
Right.
So I would just pull up some tickets maybe that I had for the next day if I had a grocery store to go and do, or any other type of facility where all of my work was inside.
Mhm.
And so I just pull that up and then go
Just
and do
readjust things and.
readjust constantly. That was
Mhm.
how that worked.
So how, speaking of that, how well did the men do that part of the job? Because typically women are fixers, and we are real quick to adjust and pivot.
Mhm.
So how did that work for them? Do you
Some
know?
of them could do it and did it well.
Because they had done it for a while, or
Possibly, or it could have just been their personality.
right.
But some failed miserably at that aspect of it, and
Yeah.
the end of the month would come and they would be way behind, and they'd have more stops that had not been ran at the end of the month than they could do,
Okay.
and then they would need help. And that's where the supervisor would jump in and help them, or as supervisors do, they like to delegate and, oh, hey, Miss Connie, you're finished with your work. You think you can jump in and help, this route technician with his, and, that kind of thing.
So because it was commission based, if you jumped in, did you get paid for that, or did?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
That's kind of nice incentive to be able to do
It
that.
was. I would get the pay for that, and then since it was on production, the higher price of that service, the more money that you got.
Okay.
So if it were big accounts, then that's when you made more money.
Kind of a nice incentive
Mhm.
to do that. So how did you feel? I know y'all didn't stay in the office much, but how did you feel, kind of being the woman in kind of a predominantly man's job world?
Well, since I already had worked in the industry, my training was much easier than it would be for someone who just came in and had no knowledge of pest control. So, and the fact I already worked for the company, so I already knew all the guys, I already had a relationship with the supervisors and with the manager. So all of that was a smooth transition for me, where
Nice.
it might not be for someone else coming into that as an industry.
Right.
So that was a smooth transition. A whole lot of them would, I'd get these little smirks or smiles or jokes or whatever,
What kind of stuff would you hear?
Oh, well, they would just, pick at me, and they would see that I was kind of full of myself and ready to go about the day, and out there whistling while I'm getting my chemicals ready and getting my truck ready. And we had to draw up little jugs of water to take with us so that we could mix chemical in the sprayer. So I'm toting my water jugs over to my truck, and I'm swinging my arms and whistling and all of that. And I thought, well, but in ways I felt like a bird let out of a cage.
Yeah.
Because I didn't say, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. I've got to go and do this.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to get out and go here and go there, and I was not chained to a phone or a desk, which there's nothing wrong with that. I enjoyed that too.
Yeah.
But it was such a change. It was such a big turnaround from what I had been doing.
Certainly different personalities thrive better in different situations.
And I enjoyed my customers.
Yeah.
And
so your personality.
And everyone was different, and I got to be a different part of me everywhere I went.
Oh, that's kind of cool to think about it like that.
Yeah. So if I went somewhere where they were just as country as I am, I could just be regular old me. And then you have accounts where people come from different walks of life. And you have to carry yourself a little differently.
Yeah.
And I had the ability to do that as well.
How did your customers perceive a woman exterminator?
This one fella came immediately to mind. His name was Johnny. And he had a nice new home, and he was a little picky about things. And if he saw, any kind of little insect or bug or whatever, he wanted that to be addressed. And I gave my customers my direct cell phone number, which most of the technicians did not do.
Oh, wow.
And he called me, and he had called me several times before, but this one day he called me. He said, not only do you give out your cell phone number, but you answer it. You don't let it go to voicemail. And I said, well, unless I'm up under a house or in a situation where I can't answer it, I answer it. But I liked the idea of, if I had a customer who had a complaint, I would like to know then instead of when I called into the office for messages, because I could have been just a mile from his house or a block from his house, and I could have swung by and handled it.
Right.
But if I get that message hours later, then I might not be going back to his area tomorrow. So then I have to call him and smooth over and say, I'm not going to be back out there for 2 or 3 days.
Right.
So I like to know.
That's a good point.
I like to know. And so there were things like that the other technicians did not do. And so my customers would when they filled out their little cards, that the company sent to them for customer satisfaction. So I got these rave reviews, and the other guys would, the guys, because I guess I was one of the guys.
Yeah.
But, they would do a little smirk, or, you get a little look or whatever, because they're not getting those types of reviews from their customers.
That is kind of interesting. Can you think of any other situations where they might have said anything to you differently, or just because you were a woman being an exterminator?
There are probably several situations that that came about during the years. There were so we have uniform pants, and the uniform pants were made out of a thick, durable. You think of if you just go to Walmart and you buy work pants. They have no stretch, no give. So when I first started, I was a particular size. And as time went on, which I later found out that stress makes you actually gain weight.
Oh, there you go.
No matter how much exercise you're getting.
Right.
Because that was a very physically demanding job. I'm out walking and moving and squatting and bending and climbing steps.
So it was stress on the body, but not per se stress.
Exactly.
Stress.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exercise to beyond a certain point
Mhm.
is actually a stress on the body
Mm.
if things aren't going right.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, as active as I was, I began to gain weight.
Mhm.
I got bigger and bigger, even though I'm still doing the same job.
Mhm.
My diet hasn't changed,
Mhm.
but I got bigger. So those particular pants, I go up a size,
Mhm.
but they were like prohibitive. I couldn't actually do my work. They kept me from being able to get into the positions of squatting down and bending over.
Because they were so
They were so tight.
Oh,
They
wow.
were just so tight, and didn't matter how much bigger.
They were probably cut for a man.
Exactly, even though they said they were women's pants.
Mm. Okay.
So they were gray in color. So I went and found pants that worked for me.
Mhm.
That were gray in color, but they were lighter gray. They were very stretchy fabric. They had pockets, belt loops, because we had to wear a belt. You know, they had
And they
pockets.
probably won't straight leg, straight at the hip.
Well, they were made that way, but they were made out of a stretchy fabric, out of and not like yoga pants,
Right.
but they were made out of a fabric that stretched. So I began to wear those.
Mhm.
So I was out of uniform.
Oh my.
And I had begun to get sick at this point, which that's another facet of the story, but I had begun to get sick at this point when all of that transpired. But my boss pulls me aside and he says, "They're not uniform pants." I said, "Yeah, I know, but the uniform pants don't work for me. I physically cannot do my job. They prohibit me from being able to do my job." And he said, "Yeah, but you don't look like everybody else." I said, "But when I go out into the field and I go and do my customer service, they only see me. They don't see that I don't match the rest of you guys, nor do they care.
Right.
They care about the service that they're getting
Right.
and my ability to do that. And these uniform pants were prohibiting me from doing my job." So that was the end of that discussion, but it got brought up
All the time.
several times later, several times.
And what kind of aspect? I mean, in an aspect of just nitpicking,
Yeah,
or
exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And I'm not, I'm not saying anything bad about the management that I had. As a matter of fact, I had a good relationship with both of the managers. But this one particular day comes to mind, and it was toward the end of my employment there. It certainly wasn't the last day, but the manager, he said, put his hand on his hip, "Miss Connie." And then he said something about the pants. And I said, "Well, I don't know how many times I have to tell you." And I, went into this whole spiel about, how this is the reason that I'm wearing them, and this is the best it's going to get. And if that's not pleasing to you right now, you can have my 2 weeks or my keys. And I've got the keys to the work truck. And it was in front of a couple of other employees. And so he calls me to his office, and he says, "That would have been better said alone, not in front of other employees." I said, "But you didn't address me in front alone. You addressed me in front of other employees." That was the last time it was ever brought up, because I had to stand firm.
So I'm just curious, how did that conversation end in his office?
That's where it ended.
Okay.
You didn't bring
You
it up.
didn't bring it up.
You didn't bring it up one-on-one. You
Right.
brought it up in front of others. So my response
Sure.
was in front of others.
That is interesting.
And so those types of things, okay, so because I'm a woman and because I gain weight differently in different places, then I had to wear certain kinds of pants. So is that me saying that as a woman I deserve special, to wear special pants? No, anybody deserves to wear something that, they're allowed to do their job in, and I wasn't able to actually
Sure.
do my job.
I mean, you stay with the color scheme, right?
As best as I could.
As
They were
best as
just
you can.
lighter.
Yeah.
They
yeah.
were just very much lighter.
Yeah,
And,
that can be the problem, I guess, with uniform type stuff, because it is so cookie cutter.
Mhm.
That it's hard to accommodate different shapes and sizes of even men
Exactly.
as well. I mean, I can imagine that they have that kind of complaint as well. I mean, not every man is made the same way.
They absolutely
we're
are
not
not.
supposed to be like that.
They absolutely are not.
So that would be kind of aggravating. But that was an 8-year stint
Mm-hmm.
that you did this,
Mm-hmm.
you did this job and was an exterminator. So I understand that through your 8 years, there was a turning of events. There was like a life-changing event, which is so typical in everybody's world. So tell us about that.
Well, that was in 2010. I had just bought a new home that year in June. Moved in July the 1st. So I had a new home, new responsibilities, a great big mortgage hanging over my head. And I had all these grandiose plans of how I was going to pay it off early. And I had sat down and crunched the numbers. I had my amortization chart, and I had a plan. And I was going to pay it off in 7 years. Looked in the mirror and talked to myself. And I said, your 50-year-old self is going to love your 43-year-old self because you're going to have this thing paid for in 7 years. And it's a 15-year note. So...
Because I'm assuming you had to sacrifice to do that.
Well, absolutely.
To some degree.
Absolutely, but is it a sacrifice when the end goal is...
No, but people see things differently.
I know. But running out to Target to get the latest, in home decor was not a big deal because at 43, I was already wise enough to know that what you like today, you might not like tomorrow. And you spend,
and trends are going to change.
Right, and you spend this money today, but then it's just something that's cluttering your space or that you're giving away or can't sell for a fraction of what you paid for it. I had lived long enough to know.
Right, yeah.
So my goal was to get the house paid for.
Okay.
And so I gave myself a little pep talk and I started off month 1 on my mortgage. I paid an extra $100. And my goal was to always pay at least an extra $100, but more than that in many and most cases. And that December, it was the first week of the month, and I, as you do, you get a little cold or sniffles. I had to blow my nose. And when I did, I put the pressure right there under my nose above my lip, and I felt something that didn't feel right. And it felt like infection. And I'm like, wow.
Like a bump or a knot?
Yes, and just I could feel swelling in there, and then there was pain when I put some pressure on it. So right under my nose, above my lip, in that little mustache area. So I had root canals and crowns done in my 20s and early 30s. After having my second child, my teeth just went... They just really went bad quickly. Which
is a whole nother conversation, what pregnancy does to women's bodies.
Absolutely. And I know now it's mineral depletion. Had I known then what I know now, I certainly would have supplemented with a whole lot more than what is recommended for pregnant women to supplement with.
Sure.
I would have supplemented extra, but I didn't know. Hindsight, 2020. But anyway, so that was on a Friday, and so being the go-getter that I was, I already had my tickets for the following week. I said, well, I need to go to the dentist on Monday, so I'm going to go out tomorrow, being Saturday, and do Monday's work so that I can go to the dentist. So I did over half of Monday on Saturday. Monday morning I got up and went and did the rest of Monday, and by 11:30 I was in my dentist office, unannounced, with this little bit of pain that I feel like is an infection. And she x-rayed it, and she said, yep, you've got infection right over that root canal crown. I'm going to have to send you to an endodontist. You're going to have a root canal retreat. And I'm like, oh, wow, sounds, icky, but it's no more than the typical root canal procedure. They're just redoing it. And so I had been through that before, and I had insurance through my job, and it was the end of December, which worked out well because,
Let's get it done.
well, and part of the procedure was in December and part in January, so I had insurance in both years, so the timing couldn't have been better for it. And so she referred me, and I went to see the endodontist and scheduled that work, and which transpired within a couple of days. And December is the hardest time in pest control to get your work done. Customers are like, they've got lots going on, they're traveling or whatever, and they try to put you off, and then you've got the company saying, you've got to get it done, you've got to get it done. You can't have all these unserviced tickets. So you're caught in between all of that, and then to have a health issue crop up at that time. So I went and I had the retreatment done. The procedure itself wasn't any worse than a regular root canal. And all of my dentists I've ever had have always told me I'm a great dental patient. I don't cringe and all that stuff. I get cavities filled with no Novocaine.
Oh my.
Just drill it and let it go on.
No, not me.
As long as they're not deep, it's not a big deal. But within 24 hours of that procedure, and the way he described the procedure to me is, okay, I'm drilling out the filling in the root, and I'm injecting medication, and then I'm capping that off. And he saved my crown. My crown was still there. So he went in under there, because that particular one did not have a post. They had, worked down the tooth and put a crown over it. So he was able to go in and clean out the root, put medication in, and put a little filling over top of it. That was to stay for a 30-day period, this medication that is supposed to treat that infection. And then at the end of 30 days, he drills it back out, opens it up, cleans it, and refills the roots. So he's filling the root canal back up. And he was able to do all that and save that crown. I never had to have it re-crowned, which saved me a lot of money in the process. But 24 hours following the first procedure where he injected that medication in there, I started to have horrible symptoms. Symptoms like I'd never had before in my life. First of all, my lymph nodes on my neck on both sides swelled up as big as my fists. I had these great big knots. My ears started ringing like speaker noise. Like if you're hearing them with the soundboard and they're trying to get the speakers right. And it's high pitch, low pitch, and it's roaring and it's ringing, and it was just going back and forth with all these different decibels. So a headache that felt like a pressure headache, like my head was in a vice, and it would lessen and strengthen, with whatever, whenever it wanted to. I don't think anything going on in my life or my day was making
worse or better.
Right, it just happened. And in working in pest control, I wore my hair up in a clip, and I always had 2 pair of glasses, a pair of readers and a pair of sunglasses. So I had a clip and 2 pair of glasses on my head at all times. And that headache would get so bad that I'm pulling down the hair and I'm pulling off the glasses. And these are things that didn't bother me before. I didn't have pressure headaches due to, glasses and hair clips. So
were you taking Tylenol or anything like that to help this stuff, or would it even help?
Not at first, because I'm not a Tylenol taker. Before any of that happened, if I got a headache, I would lay down and take a nap and wake up, and if I still had a headache, then I would take a Tylenol. And that's just the way I've always been. Just never been one to take a lot of stuff.
I am absolutely the same way. I do not take stuff if I don't have to.
Absolutely. So, and I don't know what made me that way. Well, and then maybe I do. I've had some people in my life who have overdone it with medications and thought that the answer to every ache and pain was in a pill bottle. And so maybe that's why I'm not that way. But anyway, the symptoms just kept coming in days, just in days. So keep in mind, this medication is still up in there. You know, he has sealed it off. He's put medication in there, which, you know, is, I guess, an antibiotic.
So, but this isn't hurting.
No, I don't have any pain there because the teeth are dead.
Yeah.
Remember, the
Right.
teeth, a root
Because of
canal
the root
kills
canal.
your tooth.
Right.
And so the tooth is dead, and the only reason I felt infection is because it was in the tissue up above the tooth. And I felt it, you know, up there. So, anyway, then my hips started hurting, and my low back started hurting, and the ears are still ringing, and the lymph nodes are swollen. And then I broke out in a rash. And then my head just started itching intensely. And so I had this rash in my head, which I ended up having to go to a dermatologist for. And then he treated me for that. And he said, well, what's going on with you? And I told him, I says, well, you know, this is all from my tooth. This all happened when I got this root canal retreat. And you get the raised eyebrow look, you know, from the doctor. But that dermatologist was the only one who remotely believed me in, you know, in the coming weeks, months, and couple of years that I would see a doctor. So ultimately I ended up with literally every symptom. If you look up fibromyalgia, I ended up with every symptom. There are about 200 documented symptoms. And you don't have them all at the same time. You will have a portion of them, and then maybe a few of those will, for a time, go away. But some others will come into play. And so they wax and they wane, and you just don't know what to expect at any given point of any day. And they change hourly, you know, or from minute to minute or whatever. So you can have this horrible chronic headache where it feels like your head's in a vice and your ears are ringing. But then other parts of your body will also have issues. IBS. You just can't make it to the bathroom quick enough. I had 4 fingernails to completely rot off.
Oh, wow.
The nail beds crumbled and dried up, so there was no support for the nails. And the nail stopped right above the cuticle on 4 of my fingers. And that just, I mean, so if you look at somebody's nails, they're really an indication of their health. And if you looked at my nails, you would have known I was in pitiful shape. But as I began to get well, they came back. But getting well was a journey. That was a real journey. Doctors would not, they wouldn't diagnose me at first. And I told my doctor, I said, my GP, I said, I know what I have. I said, I have fibromyalgia. She said, well, there's nothing we can do for that. And I said, well, there's got to be. I've got to be able to get back to where I was. You know, all of a sudden I had this tooth infection and my life has changed forevermore. Well, I don't think that had anything to do with it. But it's right there. It's right there in front of my face, in front of their faces.
Let me ask you this. It started with a tooth infection, and a GP says, I don't think that would have started it. When, I'm not going to say everybody knows, because everybody probably don't know, but most people know that an infection in your mouth and in your tooth area, whatever, can cause heart damage. It can this area can cause so much damage to your body. How could that GP say that?
I don't know, but I do know that I ultimately quit going to see her.
Sure.
And she was a Duke doctor. But at any rate, between going to, now the dermatologist out of all of them was the most helpful. He really truly was. He referred me to a rheumatologist. He said, you could have psoriatic arthritis, because what was going on with my nails to him looked like it could be psoriasis of the nails. Well, when people have psoriatic arthritis, the nail beds are affected. But that wasn't what it was, because they're back. So Anyway, I went to a rheumatologist. He was about as helpful as my kitty cat outside.
Mm-hmm.
He had a tooth issue the same month, the exact same month. My daddy's sister had a tooth issue, and she ended up having the same symptoms that I did. And after I told my daddy, of course, what I was going through, because when you first start aching and hurting, you tell your spouse, your significant other, I've been having a tough time. And then people at work, I would come in after working a day and they're expecting Chipper Connie, coming in singing a song or, with a smile on her face, and I'm coming in, I'm dying in pain, I'm frowning, I'm grunting, I'm moaning, and they're like, what's wrong with you? Because this is not what they were used to seeing. And I'm like, I can't graze my arm on something without it sending radiating pain throughout my body. I can't step the wrong way if I'm walking along and I step on uneven terrain, which was part of the job, or kick something. If you're in a stock room of a grocery store and there's the great big, floats that they're in your way, and your feet are tools just like your hand. You go to, push one out of the way, and you're, going through the motions of work. I could kick something and it would just hurt me all over. Mm-hmm. And what I really found out was your body truly is connected, because you can do something over here and it can make you hurt up here. Mm-hmm. And that for me was the strangest and weirdest thing, to figure that out the hard way. Wow. And I had all of these aches and pains and couldn't sleep, would be so tired and so fatigued, but yet go to bed and be wired, just wide open, and could not rest. And then the mind would start racing. And it's like, no, you don't need to be thinking about that. You don't need to be thinking about tomorrow, But my body was just all stressed and tight and tense. And, this was just all on the heels of that procedure, that dental procedure. And, I had the procedure thinking that took care of the infection. Right. But it truly did not take care of the infection. Mm-hmm. I lived with that infection for 8 years before I had all of my root canal teeth surgically removed. Mm-hmm. And I had a denture for a while, which was a treat. And now I have implants. Mm-hmm. And they were quite expensive.
It's a very expensive mouth.
Quite expensive, but to me they're worth it.
Absolutely.
I'm a talker, I'm a communicator, even love to sing. Mm-hmm. Really tough to sing with dentures in your mouth. Oh, it's done every day. Now I'm such a tooth noticer. I can look at stars on TV and tell you who has dentures and who has implants.
That is so funny. So with this infection that you had, did you just hurt? I know you said it radiated all through you, so there was no rhyme or reason to any of this.
This infection is traveling throughout your body via your lymph system. Mm-hmm. Your immune system can't get in to fight this at its source, being the tooth, because the tooth is dead. All the blood supply is cut off. Mm-hmm. to the tooth. So your white blood cells can't get in there. And science was never my forte, but I sure had to learn a lot of stuff. So your immune system can't get in there to fight that infection. But the infection is traveling via the lymphatic system, because there's lymph is attached to your teeth are attached to your lymph system. Mm-hmm. So this infection's going throughout your whole body, which for me was causing these symptoms throughout my whole body. Mm-hmm. Well, so my poor immune system is trying to attack it over here and attack it over there and fight it here and fight it there. So my immune system got really worn down. And during the first year or two, couple of years, I was going to my regular doctor.
You were still working
Still working, because this hit me in December of 2010,
Mm-hmm.
and I worked until the end of May 2013.
Okay.
So I worked for 2 years and 5 months
Mm-hmm.
with fibromyalgia,
Mm-hmm.
and that's in a very physical job.
Mm-hmm.
With all the elements changing, the seasons changing, and so it was tough. And the last year of my job, I was cutting so many corners. And I told my boss this when I gave him my notice. I was cutting so many corners on my service that not only was it not fair to my customers,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't fair to the company, and it wasn't fair to me because I'm out.
Who you are.
It's not who I am. It's not what I was hired to do,
Right.
but it's what I had to do. You've got to find coping mechanisms throughout your entire day, and every step I could save was a precious step. Every single amount of energy I could conserve. It's like if you've only got a certain amount of gas,
Mm-hmm.
but you've got a certain distance to go, and you've got to make it work. And that's how I had to utilize my energy.
Mm-hmm.
And fatigue was a huge part of it. I could just, fall asleep at the drop of a hat. I would have to actually pull over and nod, and part of my job was riding around all day,
Right.
going here, going there. And I'd have to, I'd go to a park, lock the doors, and just nod off.
Wow.
So all of that came into play, and there were so many symptoms. I mean, I could sit here and just tell you all of them. It's, I went over some. My hair started falling out. Started losing a tremendous amount of hair, so then I start researching things.
So at this point, you're not on any medicines.
Mm-mm.
Doctors have not diagnosed you. They're not even hearing you when you tell them, I have fibromyalgia. And if they did hear you, there's nothing that we can do for that.
That's what she said.
Okay.
And she threw up her hands in exasperation and said, I don't understand. What is it you want me to do?
Wow.
And I said, I want you
to be a doctor.
I want you to figure out what's wrong with me. And then I want you to tell me what I need to do to fix it. I didn't tell her I wanted her to fix it, because nobody can fix me like I can fix me.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what I need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And she couldn't.
So at this point, you are probably extremely just
every day I'm
frustrated, worn out for sure, in pain. What do you do to start fixing you?
Well, everybody has their own rock bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and I certainly felt like I was at mine.
Tell us some of that. What did that look like?
Well, here I was with a brand new house.
Mm-hmm.
So much to be grateful for. I wanted to fix it up the way I wanted to fix it up. I wanted to work in my yard. I wanted flower beds. I wanted this. I wanted that. All of that took energy that this new version of me did not have.
Mm-hmm.
The old version of me could go to work all day long and do all of that, and then come home and grab a shovel and dig a hole and plant trees.
Right.
And then come in the house, take a shower, turn on some music, run in the kitchen, sing and dance while I cooked.
Mm-hmm.
And then when, my man came home, I've done it all. I've brought home the bacon and fried it up in a pan.
That's right.
That was the old me.
Mm-hmm.
This new me would pull up in the driveway and fall asleep sitting in the truck.
Wow.
And couldn't even come in the door with that. I was just so fatigued. I just sat there and fell asleep with my head on the steering wheel for an hour, and then would come in, drag myself straight to the shower, and then drag myself to the bed. And he's come home, and the house would just be pitch dark because it had gotten dark, and I had fallen across the bed during daylight. And so he's worried, oh my, the house is dark, she's home. Well, I've just crashed across the bed because I'm so fatigued and so worn out. So I guess that's my rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And, not being able to do the things I wanted to do. And
how long did that period go on?
Well, when I finally decided I had to quit work, and that was in about December of 12 when I decided. And I asked Jose if he thought we could make it on just his, his pay. I'm making my apologies. I'm sorry. I bought this house knowing that I could pay for it because we're not married, so our finances, we're separate. I bought this house knowing that I could be responsible for that payment if you would only be responsible, for our other expenses, and that was how the plan was supposed to go. But my health taking that kind of turn was not anything that I would have expected at that young of an age.
Absolutely.
So he's like, yes, we can do this. So in January of 13, I told my boss, the one who didn't like my pants, that I would be quitting in late spring, early summer. And he didn't really believe it at first. And I told him, I said, how my health has been. And he had some health challenges too. And he understood kind of what I was going through. And he didn't make his health challenges really widely known. We all knew something was going on with him, but, he being the boss, he didn't tell us everything. But, so he did understand to a degree what I was going through. So I told him in January, and then sometime in late February, I mentioned something about my quitting the end of May. Because I kept reiterating that to him because I knew he kind of didn't believe me. And who gives a 5-month notice?
Right.
But I gave that long of a notice. I thought, well, if I can just make it till then, I'll be quitting right before the heat of the summer. If I can just make it through because the winter's easy. That's the easy time in pest control. Spring, it starts picking up. The bugs wake up, and the ants come crawling into the kitchens.
Yeah.
So, but I felt like if I could make it till the end of May, that'd be a good time to quit. So, when he finally realized it, then he started the hiring process to find people to train and this, that, and the other. But ironically, the man who had my route before me was ready to take it back.
Okay.
So he took it back. And so my customers got somebody that they were familiar with, which I don't know why I felt like I owned my customers, but I did.
Yeah.
They were mine. And so turning them back over to somebody that, they had before me, was better than a complete stranger.
Yeah.
Not that was within my power, but I felt like it was.
Right. Well, because you took ownership.
Yeah.
You cared.
But I had been researching online, and I did not have a computer at the beginning of all of this. I'm a late bloomer with technology. I did not have a computer until sometime in maybe 2011, 2012. So at the very beginning of it, I think it was probably December of 11 when I got a computer. And ironically, your cousin is the one who gave me my first computer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah.
When he had rebuilt.
Okay.
He couldn't believe I didn't have a computer. And he says, here, he says, I'll give you one.
He can be a sweetie.
Yes. So he gave me a rebuilt computer. And my former sister-in-law, she helped me hook it up. And, my youngest son had convinced me to get internet, which I already had internet so that he could access it when he was here. So that opened up a whole world for me.
I sure did. Wow.
And I was able to research. And I sat in there in that chair, and I would be so stiff, and I would hurt so bad sitting there at that computer chair researching and looking up fibromyalgia, its symptoms, its causes, what can be done for it, this, that, and the other. I joined support groups, which...
Online support groups?
Online support groups on Facebook.
Okay.
Facebook support groups.
Okay.
Which turned out not to be something that I enjoyed at all. Because... And fibromyalgia is an awful, terrible thing, but there was so much negativity. It was, and I felt sorry for them because I was in their shoes. And it's always, I don't know. It's just the snowball effect going downhill, an avalanche of the pain and the suffering and this and that. And I understand it, I get it. But somewhere on one of those support groups, someone shared a link that I followed. And I wish I had written down who shared that link, because I'd want to send them $1 million if I ever won the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
I followed that link, and it was to a naturopathic doctor in Alabama. And everything he had to say validated exactly how I felt, exactly what I was going through, with symptoms that I've not even barely touched on, all of the symptoms that I even had, because they were so varied and so just chronic, constant stiffness and pain. Sleep all night long and wake up and feel like a freight train had parked on you all night long. When you get up out of bed, you're like the Tin Man with no oil. And you take a shower and you think, oh, that's going to relax me. And it doesn't. All that does is it wears you out. You're actually more tired when you get out of the shower than you were when you got in the shower. And just getting on your pants and having to learn that I can't step into my pants anymore. I have to go sit on the bed and put my pants on, sitting on the bed, and then stand up and pull them on. That's really hard for a woman in her 40s who had been out here a hired killer for a living.
Exactly.
Running from mean dogs that want to bite you, killing snakes, even when you're scared of snakes yourself.
My gosh, yes, no.
You know, all of the things that I had to do, crawling under houses with spider webs in my hair,
Oh, no, thank you.
and doing foggings for cockroaches and having roaches swarm up to the ceiling and then fall in my hair.
Oh, my goodness.
And I'm thumping them off of me as I leave the house. I went
To
from
not be able to put on your pants.
to not being able to put on my pants. And so that tough girl mentality was still there.
Right.
And while, yes, I understood on those support groups what I was reading and the tone of what I was hearing, because I was going through that too, there had to be something else. And so that link.
So was the tone more of a victim mentality?
Absolutely, because that's what you are. You feel like you've been victimized. You've been robbed. Somebody has came in and stolen your life from you, somebody or something. You've been robbed.
So they took the avenue more of, I guess, being the victim and staying in that mentality.
But that's what we're taught. That's what the doctors tell you. I don't understand. What is it you want me to do?
Right.
There's nothing we can do for fibromyalgia. Those are the words that I heard from my doctor. And I knew, you know, that's why I sat in there stiff in a chair at a computer, because this was before I had an iPad. So I sat in there and I researched and and I'm like, you know, all of this is at my fingertips. I've got to find a way.
So you follow this link to this
naturopathic doctor in Alabama. And, you know, he's got all these videos up. So immediately I'm drawn to him because of his personality and his accent. And he's, you know, like one of us. And then everything he's saying is what I'm living. He knows how I feel. He knows these symptoms. You know, he's telling all this, but then he's telling why you feel this way. Well, you have these symptoms because this is wrong, and you have these because this is wrong. But you have to treat the whole body, because what fibromyalgia really is, it's cause and effect. It's this snowball of symptoms that starts, in my case, from a chronic infection. And a lot of people have chronic infections, but it can be something like Epstein-Barr virus or anything. There's just a myriad of things that cause it. For me, it was a tooth infection that I'm still living with. You know, I had the tooth retreated, which was supposed to kill the infection, and it did as far as the local infection, but it was sent systemic throughout my body.
Right.
So I didn't have a local infection anymore. It's traveling. And this tooth is still putting out infection that's traveling. every day throughout my lymphatic system and going throughout my whole body. So, but of course I didn't realize that then.
Right.
Because, in the Bible it says if thy eye offend thee, pluck it out.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the same for a tooth. If something is causing you that problem, get it out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I had known, I would have gladly had my front tooth pulled, and it was my front tooth.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you don't go willy-nilly and have your teeth pulled.
Right.
You don't just do that. So it took me quite a while to figure out.
So following this doctor and his ways of healing, or
well, his protocols,
what was that journey?
That was excellent. At first, I went ahead and I ordered his book.
Mm-hmm.
I watched his videos online. I ordered his book, so I would have that information right there every day. I could take it with me wherever I went.
Mm-hmm.
I ordered his supplements. I took them. Week 3 on those supplements. That chronic headache that I had, where my head was always in a vice
Mm-hmm.
of differing intensity, on a Sunday, my head felt absolutely awful. Felt like something down inside of my brain was erupting.
Mm.
But somehow I intuitively knew that this was part of it getting better. And I don't know why I felt that way, but it felt so terrible. And I made Jose massage it. Him being a typical guy, did the little,
Mm-hmm.
and I got quite vocal and screamed at him and took his
Go
hands.
deep. I need you to rub deep.
Took his hands and I told him and made him massage it in the way I needed him to massage my head, and would not let him stop
Mm-hmm.
until I wanted him to stop.
Yeah.
And
So you're taking these supplements at this time?
yes, and this
Okay.
was at the week 3 mark.
Okay.
The headache went away and it never returned.
Oh,
And
my.
I'd had it for 2 years.
Oh my.
It went away and it never came back. That was just one of all of these symptoms. But
And these supplements that you're talking about, what are we talking about? What kind of supplements? What are we talking
we are
about?
talking about the things that God intended for our bodies to operate off of.
Mm-hmm.
Vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and essential fatty acids.
Mm-hmm.
They're all in a therapeutic grade, which, is a fancy way of saying, they're like a medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in higher doses than what the RDA, which is the recommended daily allowance.
The over-the-counter stuff.
Right. They're in higher, they're in what,
More concentrated, I'm sure.
they're what they call an optimal dose,
Mm-hmm.
which is what anyone, even somebody who is not sick, would be your optimal dose of these nutrients so that your body works optimally. So I'm like, okay, supplements ain't ever killed anybody.
Mm-hmm.
This is what's in our food. So I'm going to try this. So in addition to those supplements, because it was 4 different products. So there was the vitamins, minerals, amino acids. And then there was an adrenal cortex, which supplements the adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys. And they're these little powerhouse glands that, help regulate your energy and hormone production. Not all of your hormones, but they work synergistically with your female reproductive and your thyroid and your hypothalamus and all this stuff I learned. I didn't know a thing about any of this, but I had to figure it all out. And this doctor was such a good teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what anyone with fibro needs, is a teacher, because you've got to understand what's happening to your body
Mm-hmm.
and why it's happening, and then what you can do to fix it, because nobody can fix it but the patient.
Mm.
You're the only one that can fix it. So the first month on his supplements, I saw lots of improvement. But there's something that he says in his videos and in his book that actually worked to my detriment, and it was that we could try to duplicate his formula on our own if we wanted to. But he does caution, however, I have designed this formula, for the fibromyalgia patient's needs. So I thought, well, okay, so I cherry picked all these supplements from different companies, and I put together my own little
That seems like it would be chemical warfare.
Well, I don't know that it was that, but I know that I did not see the improvements that I would ultimately see when I went back on his supplements. So while I had hit a rock bottom and I found him, I loosely followed his protocols after that first month of taking his supplements because I thought that I could do it cheaper, you know, and keep in mind I had quit work. So I didn't have my income, so I was trying to do, and I had a house to pay for. So I was trying to do it as inexpensively as possible. So, but what happened is in taking all these supplements, they weren't curing the infection, but they were boosting my immune system that was being taxed by the infection. So they weren't curing anything, but they were supplementing my body with what was being taken away. So another year and a half went by. So it was in 2015. It was in August. I said, you know what? This doctor offers consults. He offers working with patients one-on-one. It was money that I didn't want to spend, but there comes a point in time where if you need to sell everything you've got and sleep on a mattress on the floor, your health is more important than money.
Absolutely.
So I consulted with him, and he actually had me do labs. I decided to become his patient after the consultation. So I did labs, and he sets up for you to do that locally. So no matter where you are, he finds a lab that you can go to, and they'll do the blood draw. He does urine sample, blood draw, even a fecal test, and a saliva test, which you do your saliva test yourself. And so I did all of these, and the ones that I collected at home, I mailed off, and he sends you a little box and a mailing label and everything. And then the blood work and your analysis went to him. So he had my profile of all of my neurotransmitters and my minerals and vitamins and what was going on within my body. And then he said, okay, I'm sending you your first month supply, which are the supplements I had taken back a year and a half earlier. So he didn't want me to take anything until he had all of the results in. Within 2 weeks of taking everything the way he said to take it, I had crippling anxiety and depression because it had gotten that bad because of my neurotransmitters being off balance. That went away completely. I was so bad at one point I couldn't even answer my telephone. I couldn't open my mail. Even though I had the money in the bank to pay my bills, I couldn't open my mail. I couldn't call and pay a bill by phone. It was the strangest.
Just because of depression?
Yeah, because of chemical imbalances.
Right.
So I had never experienced depression or anxiety before, but I knew that's what I was going through now. And so one would say, well, oh, you were going through that because your life changed so drastically, because you were in pain, because of this, that, and the other. No, I was going through that because everything was so imbalanced because my system just spent everything it had fighting an infection, and I couldn't take in enough nutrients to support my immune system. And you want to talk about colds? Oh, the colds that I got during that time.
You couldn't fight it off.
Oh no, they were horrible. They would last for 4 or 5 weeks at a time. Just a regular old cold would just turn into the biggest production. And but anyway, so getting on his supplements, I saw just this huge turnaround so quickly. There were still issues, but I was, for the most part, as long as I felt like, okay, I'm able to do my housework, I'm able to pay my bills, I'm able to do things I couldn't do before because I just was in almost this vegetative state
Mm-hmm.
mentally, and then physically I hurt so bad. I couldn't go up and down the steps, and I couldn't open a door to, like, a convenience store door.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're heavy, the metal
Mhm.
frame and the plate glass.
Right. Yeah.
That took all of my strength just to pull a door like that open.
The things we take for granted, right?
And here I am, this big strapping country girl,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't open a door.
Mm-hmm.
I was crawling under houses a couple of years ago,
Right.
and I can't open a door or put my pants on without sitting down. So anyway, I continued with the supplements. I continued working with him, because when I signed on to work with him, it was for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked by phone. You could choose Skype, phone, or if you live close enough to him, you could go see him in person if you wanted to. I've yet to meet the man. And I told him, I said, one of these days I'm coming to Alabama, and I'm going to give you a big old bear hug and lift you off the floor, because I can.
Yeah.
And I can because of you.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing the work that he does and the results that he has. But yet our doctors out here in mainstream cannot and will not treat us in this manner, because there's no money to be made off of prescribing supplements.
Right.
There's no money to be made, you know, in typical medical care.
Right.
Now he does only this. He's a chiropractor, which they first of all believe in natural healing first of all. And that's how he got started, was in his chiropractic practice. Women who were at their wit's end of what to do would go to him for an adjustment, you know, see if you can help me. But he had minored in nutrition, and so his wheels started turning, and he figured out, well, you're having problems with this, well, maybe you should take this supplement and that supplement. He'd write down what for him to go and get, and they'd go and get it, and then they'd tell him, you know, that helped. And so that's how he got into doing this. And so now he doesn't do chiropractic work at all. He is a fibromyalgia doctor.
Wow.
And that's what he does.
At what point in time during your work with him did y'all figure out that it was the tooth?
Well, I told him from the beginning that this is, you know, this is the series of events. And I know for a fact it came from that retreat. It came from that root canal retreat. And he said, yes, he said root canals have, you know, caused fibromyalgia in the past. Well, an ironic thing happened. It was after my 6 months of working with him was over, and, you know, I'm still taking the supplements every day, but I have gone from, if you put where I was at 10%, so I had 10% output, I had gone from 10% up to about 80 or 85%. Wow. So I was able to not only do what I needed to do here, but my mother, her health started to fail, and her husband's health failed. And so I went and started taking care of her 5 days a week for about 5 hours a day. I went and helped her at her home, which is about a 50-minute drive from here. I'd go and help her with her daily living needs and her grocery shopping and paying her bills and taking the dog to the groomers and the vet and just all of that.
And you had to lift her?
Well, I had to not lift her, but I had to be a physical support, helping her transition and move, because she had limited mobility. She was in chronic pain, but she had stenosis of the spine, and she was diabetic. So during the time I was working with Dr. Murphy, I started taking care of her. And then the 6 months ended, and I'm still taking care of her. So I'm not working with him anymore, but I'm still taking his supplements and following his protocols.
Right.
Another one of my root canal teeth failed. My youngest son and I were eating Chinese for lunch one day, and I bit into an egg roll, and out came my root canal tooth. It wasn't the one, it wasn't the culprit tooth, it was another one. And it was July the 3rd. So naturally, the dentist office was closed. And I had to go the whole holiday time without a front tooth. And so I got in there, and they said, wow, and I told them, I said, I will not have another root canal retreat. And, they knew this. I said, that will not be happening. And they said, well, you won't be able to because this root canal fractured. So the root, they drill the pulp out of the root, but they leave the outer, it's like a tooth, hard like a bone, I guess. Well, that fractured. So there was nothing there to hold a root canal in anymore, or a post or a tooth. And I said, oh man, so what are my choices? And they said, well, an implant. And it was over on the side, but in the front. And I said, okay, I guess I'll have to get an implant. And so that's a process. It doesn't happen immediately. And I needed a bone graft. And so I was sent to an oral surgeon, not the same endodontist that did the root canal retreat, which I think that's all that guy specialized in, was root canal retreat. So I had that particular tooth. I had a dental implant, and it took 9 months altogether because the bone graft has to seat for 4 months, and then they put a post in, and then that post has to seat for 4 months, and then you get a crown put on that. So it is a 9-month process. By the time you get your appointments lined up right, it was 9 months. And I had one little flipper denture, but I never wore it. It was very uncomfortable. It was just better to go around snaggletooth. But with all the other things that had happened to me, going without a tooth was so, it was just nothing. It was nothing. But that wasn't the culprit tooth, so getting rid of that.
So after you got the one tooth out that was not the culprit tooth, did you still know that that was the culprit tooth and that it needed to come out?
I wasn't. This was probably the point of awakening that it needed to come out. Because I knew that as long as I took these supplements, that I felt really good. But should I get close to reorder time and run out after 2 or 3 days, I really felt symptoms coming back on.
That quick.
Symptoms that had been gone, that I had not seen, they're coming back.
Like boom, that quick.
They're not coming back. They're not coming back in the intensity.
Right.
They're creeping up. So a few symptoms would creep up and they would be mild. And then the more days I would go without the supplements, the stronger they would get, or more symptoms would reintroduce.
So what type of supplements are we talking about? Are we talking just what are?
Vitamins, minerals, amino acids, an essential fatty acid, which is a fish oil, adrenal cortex, which supports the adrenal glands, 5-HTP, which is the precursor to melatonin. Well, it's precursor to serotonin. So 5-HTP, when it is in the body, it transfers into serotonin, which then makes melatonin, which serotonin is your feel-good hormone, your feel-good chemical, and melatonin makes you sleep well, makes you get into a deep sleep. So those were imperative because your body repairs from the day when you're in a deep state of sleep. You have to rest. Rest is so important. We don't realize it when we're young, and we stay up late and we burn the midnight oil and we stay up all night long, and then we go out the next day. I remember staying up all night and still going to school the next day. Crazy stuff like that. But then I also remember being able to come home and crash on the couch and just get into this wonderful deep sleep and to recuperate so quickly. And as we get older, we can't do it like that. But
so when you say vitamins, are you just talking about
vitamin A, vitamin B, all of your B's?
I didn't know if there were specifics.
No, it's all of them. Okay. They're all there. Vitamin A, all of your B's, vitamin C, Vitamin D is in there, although he now recommends that you take much more vitamin D than is in there. So he recommends that you purchase that separately, which he offers, or you can purchase it somewhere else. So all of the vitamins are there, all of the minerals that you wouldn't even think about. You know, when somebody mentions minerals, I mean, what would you think about? Maybe your magnesium, maybe potassium, but there are so many there. And did you know that your vitamins won't work if you don't have the minerals?
Oh, wow.
They won't work. So if you take vitamin supplements, but your body is deficient in minerals, the vitamins are not going to work. So there's a synergy there. So I continued to take the supplements, and you know, I had the tooth out, and then I had the implant done. And fast forward a year and a half later, Mama passed. After she passed, I had another root canal tooth go bad. Now keep in mind, these were all done in my 20s and early 30s, and the life expectancy on a root canal crown is about 20 years. They're not meant to last forever. And so I had another one go bad right next door to the culprit tooth, right next door to the one that had been retreated. So 2 doors down over here and right next door over here. And I went to the surgeon, and he did an implant, and the implant failed. The screw came out. I felt infection. I called the office. He was not in the office that day. I went in the office. I said, I need some antibiotics. I have infection. Oh, well, we can't just give you some antibiotics without being seen, and we don't have a doctor that can see you. I'm like, well, I've got infection. So I go to my dentist. She couldn't see me right then, but she wrote me a prescription for antibiotics, and the secretary went and got it for me, handed it to me, and I went and got it filled. Good thing, because it got really raging that night, and then the next day it got so much better. So had I not gotten my hands on them then, there's no telling what would have happened. But that the post fell out, so I knew I wouldn't be able to get an implant there. And we're talking all of my front teeth. These are my 6 top front teeth that were affected. And so I make an appointment and go back in and see him. I take him his little post back. And he said, why do you think that it failed? This is the surgeon. I said, because it's next door to that nasty tooth I've been telling you about. It is next door to the tooth that is causing me all of these problems that I've had for years. And at that point in time, still taking the supplements, the only problem I really had was inflammation in my knees. My knees were in terrible shape. All these other fibromyalgia symptoms had gone away because I'm taking these high quality vitamins and minerals and amino acids, all the supplements. I'm doing everything in the protocols that Dr. Murphy had outlined. So my knees were my only problem. So if I had to go through life, I had already came to terms with, if I have to go through life with these terrible knees, that is so much better than all of that other suffering that I went through. I'll just hobble along through life. So I went back to my dentist, and I told her, I said, I want all of these teeth out. And she said, no. I said, yes, ma'am. I want every one of these teeth out. I want all of the root canal crown teeth pulled. And she said, okay. She said, I will refer that back to the surgeon. So one of her assistants, and I don't know if she sent the assistant in or not, but one of the assistants came in, you know, because the dentist will hop from room to room. And the assistant said to me, she said, are you sure you want to get these healthy teeth pulled? I said, who says they're healthy? They are dead. I said, of the 6, there's one that is a crown only. It had not been root canaled, and it was right up in the middle of all the ones that had. That one gave me no problem. It had just a crown on it. But for the sake of continuity, it got pulled too, so that I could get these bridges of implants in. And I said, they're not healthy. There's nothing healthy about them. They're dead. They are dead. There's no blood supply to them. I said, and that one is pumping infection out in my body and has been for a long time, and I know it. And so, but here's the difference. At this point in time, I had the money to pay for all of that. Prior to, I didn't have the money to pay for all of that. So I went to surgery, and keep in mind, it was a total of 6 teeth, but one already had been fixed, so there was already an implant on one. One was already out because that was the one that failed, so I had 4 remaining that needed to be taken out. And they were all taken out in one day, and I left there missing 5 because one had been implanted already. So I left there missing 5. So that was a trip. But within just 24, 48 hours, about half of the inflammation in my knees went away. All of it did not go away immediately, but about half of it did. And I knew I had made the right decision because I just felt a different level of, I just knew the infection was going to go away. Now it's still in my system. It takes time for your immune system to fight that off. But the source was gone. There was nothing there to pump that infection out anymore.
So how do you feel today?
I still have remnants of what my body's gone through because you don't go through that, particularly at middle age, and for years. So we're talking, it all started at 43 and a half, and I'm coming up on my 53rd birthday. So 10 years from when it all started. I have remnants of it, but how I feel today is great. Sunday, I do notice that sometimes if it's rainy or whatever, that I'll have just a few little aches, but it's nothing in comparison to what I went through. So if I have a few little aches because it's a rainy day, I can just chalk that up to being 53 years old and overweight. I could chalk it up to a lot of things, but I don't suffer. I don't suffer. So there's suffering and then there's aches and pains.
Right.
And so what I have now are, a few little aches and pains occasionally, not even daily, just once in a while. So, and it's not anything that I can't push through. And I can lay down on a day that I have aches and pains and wake up the next morning and feel like $100. Well, maybe $1,000. I feel great, in other words. And prior to that, you could lay down at night when you've had a terrible day and wake up feeling just as bad or maybe even worse because you're not getting into a restful sleep.
Wow. So you've been a strong woman all of your life, because I just happen to have known you the majority of that. But professionally, you were a strong woman in your exterminator career, and then, in my opinion, going through any kind of tragic event, or in your case, the fibromyalgia, which is a tragic event, you were strong with that and have come through that. So what does the future hold for Connie?
Well, my wheels are always spinning, and I have, of course, we all have plans, but we have to have the ability to adapt and to change our plans depending on what falls in our lap. And fibro certainly is something that fell in my lap and wasn't part of my plan. I don't think it would be part of anybody's plan. I do have some goals. I would like to, I've got a big farm, and I would like to make part of that farm, profitable. So we'd like to build a barn and pasture in. We've got a beautiful field of grass that we keep mowed. We'd like to pasture that in and board just a few horses, maybe 4. We have 3 of our own, and they're in a little pasture, in a separate field. So that is one thing that we would like to do, and that would be something we would work on together. Him after he comes home from work, and of course I'm here during the day. At this point in time, I'm here during the day. I was working part-time, but this whole COVID-19 thing changed that.
Yeah.
So I don't have a little part-time job anymore. Hopefully I'll get to go back to that.
Yeah.
But so that's one goal is the horse boarding, and we'll build the barn ourselves. I mean, we do that kind of thing, and Jose can build anything he sets his mind to, and we do everything on a shoestring. We will reuse materials in a heartbeat, and you know, build something that would normally cost $5,000. We can come in 1,500, just because that's what we do. So additionally, I've got a lot down the road. I'd like to put a couple of mobile homes down there. I would really rather build cottages. And again, that's something that we could do, but then that's going to be a little more expensive to build cottages. So I'd probably put a couple of used mobile homes down there and have a couple of rentals. And then that way I would have, you know, a little income coming in from here at home to sustain me during my older years that are approaching quickly.
Yeah, so there's no doubt in my mind that the strong woman Connie will definitely conquer whatever she is planning to do. Maybe have to pivot a little bit, because that's what we have to do sometimes. We certainly didn't expect COVID-19 to happen, so we've had to pivot during these times as well. But there is no doubt in my mind that the strong woman that I have known that you have always been will definitely continue to be the strong woman. And the biggest battle, I think, you know, the strongest person that you have been was during the fibro itself. So yeah, kudos to you.
I'm glad to hear that. I've always felt that, and it's when I was at my weakest that I was also at my strongest.
Absolutely.
Because
We
nobody
don't feel it.
Nobody could fight for me but me.
Yeah.
And nobody knew what I was going through but me until I found Dr. Murphy online. But you know, you feel, no matter whether anybody says anything or not, you feel like you're just consistently being judged. Because
or maybe alone.
I didn't feel that alone, but I did feel like I was being judged. Because I went from being able to do any and everything to not being able to. And ironically, some women, their husbands are the worst. Their husbands are absolutely the worst, and they're the ones that they're condescending to them, they're judgmental to them, and it breaks up marriages. Fibro breaks up marriages. Adult children don't speak to their mothers, and it's generally women who go through this, although some men do have it. But it rips relationships and families apart because people don't believe that you can hurt that bad. People don't believe that you can have all of that going on with you and that you didn't just fall over and die.
Right.
There's no way that you can have 200 different symptoms and that you can feel that bad all day, every waking hour of the day and not die.
Yeah.
Well, you can.
Yeah.
You can. And there's a high suicide rate with fibromyalgia patients. And I had never got to that point, never felt that way. But I did have this thought. I did have the thought go through my mind. I understand how. I understand how some people can resort to that. Well, if you ask me, that's just one step away from having that thought.
Yeah.
So I remember thinking that, and I might have even thought it out loud. You know, that I understand.
It's got to be so frustrating, though, for fibro patients, because the traditional medical world, you know, most people think, well, just go to the doctor. Just go to the doctor. That's not always the answer.
They don't have the answers.
They don't have the answer.
And if they do, they're not sharing it. And I think that's largely because the only way to heal it, and this is the only way to heal it, is to get healthy. And the only way to get healthy is to supplement what the body needs, what it's lacking, and then find out why. And in my case, it was a chronic infection. And again, fibro is a snowball effect. You know, so I've got this chronic infection that's just inhabiting my body and every part of my body, and all parts of the body are connected. Those adrenal glands that I mentioned, one of their duties is to manufacture your stomach acid. If you do not have enough stomach acid in your stomach, you don't digest your food properly. If you don't digest your food properly, you don't assimilate your nutrients properly. If your nutrients aren't assimilated properly, they're not manufacturing the hormones. They're not manufacturing the neurotransmitters that send the messages to our brain for all of the other systems to work the way they're supposed to work. So the immune system was the beginning for me. And then those poor little overworked adrenal glands, which handle your body's stressors. Those are your stress coping glands. They produce everything that your body needs to regulate stress. And if my body was in a chronic state of stress because of an infection, they were overworked. So when they're overworked and they're not producing everything they need to produce, the first thing they cut was stomach acid. So then one of the symptoms I had was acid reflux. GERD is what they call it. So the doctors teach us, and commercials, and society teaches us, oh, if you've got acid, you need to take a Tums. You need to take something that's going to reduce your acid because you've got acid, coming up in your throat. That's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. I don't know the name of it. It's got a funny little name, but there's a little flap that is at the end of your esophagus and at the beginning of your stomach. And when your acid level is high enough, it holds the flap closed. And when your food goes down, the flap opens and it goes into the stomach. And then the stomach acid pushes the flap back closed. So picture a mud flap. That's about what it is. And so if there's enough acid level to hold it closed, it doesn't open until food pushes it open. Okay, so low stomach acid. If your acid is too low, that flap, it opens when it shouldn't. Particularly if you bend over, acid will come up your throat. The last thing you need to do is take something that's going to deplete your acid. You need to take something that's going to manufacture acid for you so that you raise your levels, so that it digests your food properly.
Right.
So that's one of the things I learned from Dr. Murphy. Well, when you're not assimilating your food properly, then you can get what's called leaky gut syndrome. So that means that all the little portions of your gut lining, they open up and they allow food particles to pass through and to get into the body and outside of the stomach, and they're not supposed to. Then the immune system has that to worry about. So my immune system was worried about this infection. Now all of a sudden it's worried about my leaky gut syndrome. And that just creates cause and effect. And digestive enzymes are another thing that's extremely important. And that was another component of Dr. Murphy's supplementation, is digestive enzymes to take with every meal. And so I followed all of that. I took all of that. And then probiotics, I can't say enough about taking probiotics. So all health, and this is so true, and Dr. Murphy's not the only one, all health begins in the gut.
I totally believe that.
All health begins in the gut. And if you just think about it, it makes such perfect sense that a little child should understand it. If our food is our nutrients, and it travels down and it goes into our stomach, and it goes through all of those intestines, of course all health begins in the gut. That's where we get our sustenance. That's where it all comes from. So you've got to keep your gut healthy. But with that chronic infection, and then those poor stress coping glands, the adrenal glands, one thing they do is manufacture that stomach acid. And so they were overtaxed because they're fighting against this infection. And so they slow down in all of their productions of the stress coping hormones. That's how come someone with fibromyalgia gets stressed so easily. And stressors they get into a panic. And the slightest little thing can really set them off. They don't have the stress coping hormones that your regular everyday
What's the stress coping? So what helps the stress coping hormone?
Well, that's the adrenal glands. So those adrenal glands, if they're not operating properly, you know what flight or fight is when you get into flight or fight. So you ride a roller coaster and you get scared. But when the ride is over, you come down and you're okay. Okay. Here's one instance that lots of things happened to me, but here's one instance. Um, I'm driving the truck, I'm working, and I'm on a highway, and I hear brakes screeching. But you're on a highway, so you got traffic in both directions. You don't know where, that you just hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So you tense up, you brace, and then you're looking around. You're like, oh man. So you're ready for an impact because you've heard it, and then you realize, okay, it's not me. That happened to me out on Highway 70. I was still in flight or fight when I got back home here.
Mm-hmm.
Because I got tensed. I got,
you're not able to let it go.
My body wasn't able to let it go. So I'm still in that. Well, that
kind of explains some things too.
That's terrible because basically you're in fear.
Mm-hmm.
Your mind isn't, but your body is. Your body is reacting as if you're being chased by a lion.
Your mind's telling you one thing, your heart's telling you another one,
and your
body's not letting.
So your body is in the situation of you're being chased by a lion.
Mm-hmm.
That's the situation your body's in, and that's the hormonal and the chemical thing that's transpiring in your body. And of course, to understand it fully scientifically, you would just really have to read Dr. Murphy's book. And naturally it's something that I read years ago, and it was my reality, but knowing the science behind every single thing and recalling that, I'm a layman. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
But I do know that those protocols, those supplements sustained me, got me to a very high level of functioning, 85-90%, while I still had the chronic infection.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got rid of that culprit tooth finally, and all of its little brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And my fibromyalgia is gone. Mm-hmm. I don't have, of those 200 symptoms, what would I say I have now? Maybe sometimes I get a little bit of numbness on the outside of my left thigh. Mm-hmm. This is my right thigh, but on the outside of my left thigh, I get a little bit of numbness and tingling. It comes and goes. It's not always there. Usually feel it at night when I lay down. Mm-hmm. Occasionally when it rains, a little bit of stiffness. Just my back just doesn't feel right, or my knees just don't feel right. But all of those 200 symptoms of a chronic headache and feeling like a train has parked on me, being so stiff that I can't move, having to rest after taking a shower, falling asleep behind the wheel and needing to pull over and rest, the numbness and tingling in my hands and my feet, irritable bowel syndrome, intense itching. Oh my, at the intense itching. I itched all over. I would scratch until I clawed myself. Wow. And it still wasn't relieving it because the itches were internal. Mm-hmm. They weren't on my skin. Mm-hmm. And I just itched and itched and itched.
So do you today still take the supplements?
I do. Mm-hmm. I do still take them. I can go for weeks without them. Mm-hmm. But I take them. Mm-hmm. And Jose takes them as well. Mm-hmm. He saw how much they helped me. Mm-hmm. And he asked me, this was years ago, he said, can I take them too? I said, sure you can. Mm-hmm. And he said, okay. And he started taking them. And then if he noticed they were getting low and I hadn't reordered yet, he'd stop taking them. And you need to reorder. Mm-hmm. And so now I just order like a 6-month supply at a time and just keep them here and have them on hand. Mm-hmm. Because they're, I try to eat better, especially now with this crazy, coronavirus going around. I'm actually eating better than I was before, getting those 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, fresh fruits and vegetables, not frozen and not canned. And on top of that, we're taking those supplements. Mm-hmm. So we're doing everything we can to stay healthy. I'm just thankful for the knowledge that I got from all of that to keep myself healthy, and anybody who'll listen, that, can understand you can beat an illness like that. But the first step is realizing that you can. Because if you say you can't,
Mm-hmm.
if you have the mentality
Mm-hmm.
that you can't, then you won't.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
well, there's one other thing. When you asked what did the future hold for me, I love to write. This may or may not be
I was
something.
wondering if you was going to bring that up.
This may or may not be something that you know about me. I love to write.
That I may not know?
Okay, well,
Okay.
you do. I love to write. I usually always wrote for expression.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of poems and songs and things like that. But in all of this, throughout the past few years, I have felt like that I needed to write a book. And an old friend used to tell me all the time, actually a few friends have told me this, that I need to write books.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
And
Either that or songs.
I've got plenty of those too. But at any rate, so I feel like my story needs to be told so that women can understand. And I don't necessarily need to tell them any more than what I've told here today as far as the scientific aspect of it, because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. I do know and understand a lot about how all that works because I've been through it and because of what I've learned. But if I could tell my story and then refer people to the doctor who made it all happen for me,
Right.
The doctor who I never met.
Mm-hmm.
I've never met him.
Isn't that odd?
Never met him, and he did more for me than any doctor I've ever had.
Yeah.
Well, but I guess it does boil down to I was my strongest when I was at my weakest.
Yep.
And
I wanted you to know that. I wanted you to hear that from somebody other than who is in your house, because we had conversations and
we did.
And
it was about 2015 when you and I really reconnected.
And and I seen some of that. I seen it in your face. I seen it in your expressions, and yeah. So I wanted you to know that you, as strong as I've always known you to be, it's inspiring to me, and I know it will be to others, that you were your absolute strongest at your weakness. So.
It might belong. Awesome. It might belong in the title of the book somewhere.
There you go. There you go. I think it was pretty awesome. So yeah, I think that's a wrap for us, though.